My name is Arthur. I'm a 45-year-old high school biology teacher, a husband, and a father of two. By nature and profession, I'm a pacifist. I spend my days teaching teenagers about the elegant balance of ecosystems, the carbon cycle, and how every organism on this planet has a specific, hardwired niche. I don't like conflict. I prefer to let natural systems self-regulate. But on a blistering, humid Saturday in mid-July, my belief in peaceful coexistence was put to the ultimate test by a group of highly invasive human specimens. The occasion was my daughter Lily's 7th birthday. For months, she had been talking about having a forest adventure picnic with her cousins and classmates. Because we live in a modest apartment without a yard, I had planned the event carefully. I woke up at 5 a.m. on Saturday, packed our family station wagon with coolers, a custom-made birthday cake, paper decorations, and games, and drove to Oak Ridge Park. Oak Ridge Park is a beautiful, dense municipal reserve on the edge of the city. It has only one premium picnic spot, a massive, hexagonal, hand-carved cedar gazebo situated right at the edge of the old-growth forest. It is perfectly shaded by 3 giant, ancient oak trees, keeping the temperature beneath its wooden roof a cool, pleasant 10 degrees lower than the surrounding sun-baked grass. It was the absolute perfect spot for a group of 7-year-olds to run around without getting heat stroke. I arrived at the park at 5:45 a.m. The grass was still heavy with morning dew, and the park was completely silent. I claimed the cedar gazebo, laid down our colorful checkered tablecloths, hung handmade paper flowers and paper lanterns from the wooden rafters, and set up a small folding table for the cake and gifts. By 7:30 a.m., my wife Clara and Lily arrived with the first group of children. Lily's face lit up when she saw the decorated gazebo. It looked like a fairy tale castle in the middle of the woods. But at 11:15 a.m., just as we were setting up the games, a massive, black, modified pickup truck roared into the gravel parking lot adjacent to the lawn. The doors flew open, and 5 adults climbed out, blasting loud, bass-heavy party music from a portable wireless speaker. They were led by a tall, heavily built man in his late 30s wearing a neon tank top, wraparound sunglasses, and a backwards cap. Let's call it Brad. Brad and his friends were carrying large coolers of beer, portable grills, and plastic chairs. They marched straight across the lawn, ignoring the dozens of open, sunny, grassy areas, and walked right up the wooden steps of our decorated gazebo. "Hey, folks," Brad said, his voice booming over our children's laughter. He didn't look at me. He just stared at the shaded tables. "We're taking this spot. We got a big crew coming for a bachelor party warm-up, and we need the shade." I stepped forward, keeping my voice as polite and calm as possible. "Actually, we've been here since 6 this morning, setting up for my daughter's 7th birthday party. The kids are just about to have lunch. There are several beautiful picnic areas right over there on the main lawn." Brad let out a loud, mocking laugh, turning to his friends. "Hear that, guys? He wants us to sit in the direct sun like lizards." He turned back to me, his smile vanishing, replaced by a cold, intimidating glare. "Listen, buddy, the park is public property. You don't own this wood. Who's stronger sits here. We're not spending our Saturday roasting on the grass just because your kid has a birthday. Pack up your paper flowers and move to the field. Children need to get some sun anyway." Before I could reply, Brad's friends began grabbing our belongings. One of them casually picked up the delicate box containing Lily's birthday cake and set it down on the hot, dusty gravel pathway outside the gazebo. Another threw our checkered tablecloths onto the grass. Lily began to cry, clinging to her mother's leg. My blood ran hot, but I looked at the 5 large, aggressive men. A physical confrontation in front of 10 young children was out of the question. Calling the park rangers or the local police would take hours, and by the time they arrived, the party would be ruined anyway. "Clara," I said quietly to my wife, keeping my eyes fixed on Brad, "help the children move the cooler and the cake to the shade of the small maple tree near the playground. I'll be right there." Brad smirked, cracking open a can of beer and sitting down heavily on the very wooden bench where Lily had been sitting moments before. "Smart move, teacher man," he muttered, propping his muddy sneakers up on our clean wooden table. "Enjoy the sunshine." I walked down the wooden steps, carrying a plastic bag of trash, but my mind was already working. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. As a biologist, I knew that every environment has its own natural defenses. Brad and his friends believed they were the apex predators of Oak Ridge Park because of their physical size and loud voices. But they had forgotten one fundamental rule of biology. In the forest, the smallest organisms always carry the most devastating power. I looked up at the canopy of the ancient oaks hanging over the cedar gazebo, then looked down at the organic debris on the forest floor. I smiled. Brad had claimed the wooden castle, but I was about to unleash the castle's true native inhabitants. I walked toward the gravel parking lot, my mind cataloging the immediate ecological factors of Oak Ridge Park. As a high school biology teacher, I spent my spring semesters leading field trips through these exact woods. I knew its microclimates, its soil chemistry, and, most importantly, its resident fauna. Oak Ridge Park was not just a park. It was a highly active, competitive ecosystem. The ancient oak canopy, sheltering the cedar gazebo, was home to 3 specific species that kept a very delicate balance. First, there was Vespula vulgaris, the common yellow jacket. July was their peak nesting season. They were constantly foraging for 2 things: carbohydrates to feed themselves and proteins for their larvae. Second, there was Solenopsis invicta, the highly aggressive red imported fire ant. The sandy, damp soil directly beneath the cedar gazebo's wooden foundation was a prime nesting ground. They were incredibly sensitive to sugar trails and possessed a highly organized pheromone-based recruitment system. If one scout ant found a highly concentrated source of glucose, it would lay down a chemical pathway that would mobilize 50,000 of its siblings within 20 minutes. Third, there was the local flock of ansur, the wild gray-lag geese. These birds were massive, territorial, completely fearless of humans, and possessed a highly digestive tract that required them to constantly graze and eliminate waste. They hung out near the park's central pond, about 50 yards away, waiting for tourists to drop breadcrumbs. Brad and his bachelor party crew were completely ignorant of these natural forces. They believed they were safe inside their wooden fortress, sipping their beers and playing their loud, obnoxious music. They didn't realize they had built their castle right in the middle of a biological minefield. I got into my station wagon and drove 2 minutes down the road to a small, dusty local convenience store and bait shop situated right outside the park gates. The shop was run by a sleepy-looking old man in a flannel shirt. I walked past the fishing rods and tackle boxes directly to the grocery aisle, systematically gathering my completely legal, non-toxic, and highly potent biological attractants. First, I grabbed 3 large, cheap plastic squeeze bottles of ultra-sweet, high-fructose strawberry pancake syrup. High-fructose corn syrup is an absolute magnet for wasps and ants because of its intense, concentrated sweetness and viscosity, which prevents it from evaporating quickly in the summer heat. Second, I bought 2 large 2-liter bottles of cheap, warm, generic brand cream soda. Cream soda contains a high concentration of artificial vanilla flavoring and esters that mimic the scent of overripe, fermenting fruit, the primary olfactory trigger for foraging yellow jackets looking for quick energy. Third, I walked over to the bait and pet section and purchased a massive 3-kilogram bag of cracked corn and wild bird seed, mixed with dried mealworms. This was a high-protein, high-fat delicacy that no bird, especially a wild goose, could resist. "Going fishing, son?" the old man behind the counter asked as he scanned the mountain of sweet syrup, soda, and bird seed. "You could say that," I replied with a polite smile, handing him a $20 bill. "Just doing some ecological management." I returned to the park, parking my car far away from the gazebo. I sat in the trunk of my station wagon, out of sight, and prepared the mixture. I opened the 2-liter bottles of cream soda, poured out a quarter of the liquid, and squeezed a full bottle of the thick, sticky strawberry syrup directly into each bottle. I shook them vigorously until the liquid turned into a thick, frothy, incredibly sticky pink nectar. I then poured half of the bird seed into a large plastic bucket and thoroughly saturated it with the remaining strawberry syrup, mixing it with a wooden stick until every single grain of corn and seed was coated in a highly adhesive, sweet, aromatic glaze. This was my ammunition, a dual delivery system of quick-release sugars and long-lasting proteins, designed to trigger a multi-layered, cascading biological response. At 11:40 a.m., I walked back toward the gazebo. Brad and his friends were fully settled in. They had set up their portable charcoal grill on the wooden steps of the gazebo, sending clouds of thick, greasy smoke directly toward the clearing where my family was sitting under the maple tree. Their wireless speaker was blasting heavy metal, completely drowning out the natural sounds of the forest. I approached the gazebo calmly, holding a plastic grocery bag containing my sticky concoction. I made sure to walk with a slight, deliberate stumble, pretending to be a clumsy, overwhelmed father carrying supplies. As I got close to the wooden pillars of the gazebo, I tripped slightly on a tree root. "Oh, whoops!" I cried out. With practiced coordination, I allowed one of the pressurized, sticky bottles of cream soda and syrup to fly from my hand. The cap, which I had secretly loosened, popped off upon impact. The warm, highly carbonated, sticky pink liquid erupted, spraying a massive, fine mist directly over the dry cedar wood of the gazebo's main support beams, the surrounding grass, and right onto the wooden steps beneath their hot charcoal grill. Brad looked over, laughing loudly. "Watch your step, Professor. You're spilling your kid's juice box all over the place." "My apologies," I said, looking appropriately embarrassed as I scrambled to pick up the bottle. But as I bent down, I used the cover of my body to discreetly reach into my pocket and scatter several large handfuls of the sticky, syrup-coated birdseed and mealworms into the tall, thick brush directly surrounding the base of the gazebo, right where the cool shade met the hot, sunny lawn. I made sure to create a continuous, delicious trail of sweet grain leading from the edge of the forest and the nearby pond directly to the wooden floorboards of their rented sanctuary. "Get out of here, man," Brad muttered, waving his hand dismissively as he took a sip of his beer. "You're ruining the vibe." "Of course. Enjoy your afternoon," I said, retreating back to the safety of the maple tree where my family was waiting. I looked at my watch. It was 11:48 a.m. The temperature was rising, reaching 32 degrees Celsius. The humidity was high. In the quiet, hidden corners of the forest floor, thousands of tiny, highly sensitive olfactory receptors were beginning to twitch. The chemical signals had been sent into the atmosphere. The natural system was now running its code, and there was absolutely nothing Brad could do to stop it. By 12:05 p.m., the temperature under the open sun had climbed to a scorching 34 degrees Celsius. Inside the shaded sanctuary of the cedar gazebo, Brad and his 4 friends were feeling like kings. They had their portable grill smoking, their loud music pumping, and their cold beers sweating in the heat. They were completely oblivious to the silent, invisible chemical alarm system that was currently radiating outward through the humid forest air. As a biology teacher, I knew that insects do not process the world through sight or sound. They process it through an incredibly sophisticated olfactory network. The warm, carbonated cream soda and strawberry syrup mixture I had sprayed in the cedar pillars was evaporating rapidly under the heat, releasing a massive cloud of synthetic vanilla esters and concentrated glucose molecules. To the local yellow jacket colony, Vespula vulgaris, nesting in the hollow oak tree nearby, this scent was the biological equivalent of a roaring siren. The first scouts arrived within 10 minutes. It started with a single, fat yellow jacket buzzing lazily around Brad's half-empty beer can. He casually swatted it away with his hand. "Stupid bug," he grunted, taking another swig. But a scout wasp never travels alone. Having identified a massive, easily accessible source of high-energy carbohydrates, the scout returned to its colony, laying down a chemical trail. Within 5 minutes, 1 wasp became 5. 5 became 20. 20 became a hovering, aggressive swarm of over 100 yellow jackets, drawn irresistibly to the sticky pink residue dripping down the main wooden pillars, the grill steps, and the sweet mist coating Brad's cooler. "Dude, what is up with these yellow jackets?" one of Brad's friends yelled, frantically waving a paper plate in the air. "They're everywhere. Just ignore them. They don't do anything if you don't touch them," Brad muttered, though he was beginning to look visibly annoyed as 3 wasps landed simultaneously on his neon tank top, attracted by the strawberry-scented overspray. But the aerial assault was only phase 1. Beneath their feet, a much more grounded army was mobilizing. My accidental spill had created a perfect, unbroken sticky bridge from the sandy soil beneath the gazebo's wooden foundation directly up the steps and onto the main floorboards. The local red imported fire ants, Solenopsis invicta, had detected the massive glucose spike. When fire ants discover food, they release trail pheromones from their dew-force gland, recruiting their nest mates in a geometric progression. Brad and his friends were standing around the grill in their thin rubber flip-flops, completely unaware that a thick, marching column of thousands of highly territorial, venomous red ants was currently streaming up the wooden steps, completely covering the areas where the sweet syrup had pooled. Suddenly, Brad's friend in the backwards cap let out a sharp, sudden yelp. He jumped in the air, clutching his ankle. "Ow! What the hell? Something just bit me." "Stop being a baby," Brad laughed, but a second later, Brad himself winced. A fire ant's sting is unique. They grasp the skin with their mandibles and inject an alkaloid venom called solenopsin, which produces an immediate, burning sensation like a hot match being pressed against the skin. Because they recruit in such massive numbers, you rarely get stung by just one. "Ow, son of it," Brad yelled, looking down at his feet. His jaw dropped. His expensive designer flip-flops and his hairy ankles were literally covered in a swarming, angry mass of tiny red ants. The sweet strawberry syrup on his feet, sprayed when the bottle accidentally ruptured, had made him the primary target. He began frantically stamping his feet on the wooden floorboards, which only served to agitate the ants further, triggering a coordinated attack. "Get out of the gazebo! They're in the wood!" his friend screamed, scrambling down the steps. But as they rushed down the wooden stairs to escape the stinging wasps and biting ants, they ran directly into Phase 3 of my biological counteroffensive. The local flock of greylag geese had been resting peacefully by the pond 50 yards away. However, geese possess an incredibly sharp sense of vision and a highly developed memory for food locations. The scent of the high-protein, syrup-coated wild bird seed and mealworms I had scattered in the tall brush surrounding the gazebo had drifted across the lawn. First, 3 massive territorial lead geese waddled out of the pond, their long necks stretched out, sniffing the air. Behind them came the rest of the flock, nearly 30 giant, heavy-bodied, completely fearless birds. They saw the trail of sticky, delicious corn and seeds leading directly up the grassy slope toward the gazebo. To a wild goose, this was a legendary banquet. They began to march in a tight, aggressive formation, honking loudly and flapping their wings. Brad and his friends, holding their ankles and swatting at the yellow jackets, stumbled down the wooden steps of the gazebo, straight into the path of 30 hungry, highly territorial, hiss-happy greylag geese. "What is this, a joke?" Brad hissed, waving his arms at the lead goose. "Get out of here, you stupid ducks." "Shoo!" He made the mistake of stepping forward and kicking his foot toward them. In the animal kingdom, this is a direct declaration of war. Greylag geese do not back down, especially when they smell food and feel their territory is threatened. The alpha gander let out a terrifying, low hiss, flattened its neck against its body, and charged. The alpha gander did not hesitate. To a 70-year-old oak-dwelling goose, a neon-clad, shouting human was nothing more than an obstacle between its flock and a delicious, syrup-coated feast of cracked corn and mealworms. The gander opened its beak, revealing its serrated, tooth-like tongue, let out a venomous, vibrating hiss, and launched itself forward with the speed of an angry feathered missile. "Get back! Get away from me!" Brad screamed, waving his arms in panic. But his theatrical waving only further agitated the flock. The gander lunged, its powerful beak clamping onto the hem of Brad's neon tank top. With a violent shake of its head, the bird ripped the cheap synthetic fabric, nearly pulling Brad off balance. "Brad, Watch out! Behind you! His friend yelled, but his warning was drowned out by the absolute wall of sound that suddenly erupted around the cedar gazebo. 30 massive greylag geese had descended upon the grassy slope, and they were in a state of feeding frenzy. They gobbled up the sticky, sweet birdseed in the brush, their heavy-webbed feet trampling everything in their path. When Brad's friends tried to push past them to reach their coolers, the geese perceived it as an attempt to steal their banquet. 5 more ganders joined the fray, flapping their massive, muscular wings with the force of wooden clubs. A goose's wing strike can pack enough force to bruise human bone, and Brad's crew was completely unprepared for the sheer physical aggression of territorial wild birds. The scene devolved into absolute, beautiful, natural chaos. Brad was spinning in circles, desperately trying to swat away the swarm of angry yellow jackets buzzing around his ears, while simultaneously kicking his legs to dislodge the fire ants that were actively injecting their burning venom into his ankles. Every time he stepped backward to escape the insects, he stepped directly into a nesting area of a territorial gander, which responded by biting his calves and flapping its wings against his shins. "My beer! They're in the coolers!" one of the friends shrieked. Indeed, the sweet, warm cream soda and strawberry syrup had completely coated the outer rim of their plastic coolers. Dozens of yellow jackets had crawled inside the lid, seeking the source of the sugar. When another friend blindly reached inside to grab a can of beer, he was immediately stung twice on the palm of his hand. He dropped the can, screamed, and began running in wide, erratic circles across the park's sunny lawn, waving his arms like a malfunctioning windmill. "This place is cursed. Let's go. Grab the gear and let's go," Brad yelled, his voice cracking with a mixture of pain, embarrassment, and pure panic. But retrieving their gear was easier said than done. Their portable charcoal grill was still smoking on the wooden steps, but the steps themselves were now a battleground. Thousands of red fire ants had fully claimed the sweet, sticky wood, and the steps were also covered in a territorial line of hissing geese eating the spilled grains. In a desperate, chaotic scramble, Brad's friends grabbed what they could. One lunged for the wireless speaker, knocking it into the dirt where it began to crackle and die. Another snatched up a cooler, only to drop it when a goose hissed and lunged at his face, sending ice, beer cans, and water spilling across the grass. Brad, completely defeated, his neon tank top shredded, his face red from swatting, and his ankles covered in itchy, burning red welts, ran toward his massive black pickup truck. His friends followed closely behind, running in their mismatched flip-flops, swatting at the yellow jackets that pursued them like a tiny, angry air force. They scrambled into the cab of the truck, slamming the doors shut. A second later, the modified engine roared to life, and the truck sped out of the gravel parking lot, leaving a cloud of dust and a trail of dropped plastic cups behind them. The entire battle had lasted less than 10 minutes. I stood under the shade of the maple tree, my phone quietly capturing the final moments of their hasty retreat. My wife Clara was trying her best to hide her smile, while Lily and her friends were cheering as if they had just watched a live-action superhero movie. "Did you see that, Daddy?" Lily laughed, pointing at the lawn. The geese chased the loud monsters away. "I saw, sweetie," I said, smiling gently. Nature has a very specific way of keeping things balanced. Now, it was time for the final phase of my ecological management project, the cleanup. As a biologist, I knew that once the food source was depleted, the system would naturally return to equilibrium. The geese spent another 15 minutes thoroughly cleaning the grass, eating every single grain of sweet, syrup-coated corn and mealworm until not a trace remained. Because the high-fructose corn syrup was water-soluble, the damp morning grass and the natural moisture of the soil quickly dissolved any remaining residue. The yellow jackets, having consumed the spilled cream soda, slowly dispersed back to their oak tree canopy, satisfied with their quick energy harvest. The fire ants, finding no more syrup on the wooden steps, organized a clean, military-style retreat back down the wooden pillars and into their underground nests. By 12:30 p.m., the cedar gazebo was completely empty, quiet, and perfectly safe once again. David, One of my nephews helped me carry our coolers and boxes back up the wooden steps. We quickly wiped down the heavy cedar tables with a damp cloth, removing any dust. I hung our colorful paper flowers and lanterns back up on the wooden rafters. I placed Lily's beautiful, undamaged birthday cake right in the center of the main table. The air beneath the hexagonal cedar roof was incredibly cool and pleasant, a perfect 24 degrees Celsius compared to the sweltering heat of the open park. For the next 3 hours, our family and Lily's friends celebrated in perfect, undisturbed peace. We ate cake, played games, and listened to the gentle rustle of the ancient oak leaves above us. Every now and then, a single gray-lag goose would waddle past the edge of the gazebo, let out a soft, friendly honk, and continue on its way toward the pond. Brad and his friends had believed that because they were bigger and louder, they could rewrite the rules of the park. They thought that who's stronger sits here was the ultimate law of the land. But they had failed to realize a fundamental truth of our planet. True strength doesn't lie in loud voices or heavy trucks. It lies in the quiet, interconnected systems of nature. And if you dare to disrupt those systems, they will always find a way to self-correct. The system was fully restored. The anomaly had been purged. And my daughter had the best 7th birthday party a young explorer could ever ask for. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Neighborhood and Nature Karma. If you enjoyed seeing a group of loud park bullies get systematically evicted by a coordinated army of ants, wasps, and angry geese, make sure to hit that like button. Write a comment below telling us what natural remedy you would have used to reclaim your family's picnic spot. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next weekly audit. Until next time, respect the environment, share the shade, and never underestimate the power of a little spilled syrup.